Okay, good evening, everybody. It's really great to see so many people coming along this evening. My name is Matthew Flinders, and I'm the director of the Sir Bernard Crick Centre, which sits within the Department of Politics that Sir Bernard actually established 50 years ago this year. It's my normal duty to do a bit of housekeeping before saying a few words about the context and the speaker. First of all, I need to say thank you to the ESRC and to the Political Studies Association for sponsoring tonight's event. In terms of fire alarms, we are not due to have any fire alarms this evening. If a fire alarm does go off, I feel like cabin crew here that there are exits over here, here and here. This is actually my real suit and not one that I was given for fire safety purposes. You're not supposed to laugh quite that loud about my suit. The event is being filmed and live streamed on the internet. One of the great things about tonight is that we were totally overwhelmed with people wanting to come along, and I think that shows that there is a great appetite for talking about exploring politics. So we are being live streamed and filmed, and basically if you don't want to be in the film, I think the rule is don't ask a question. But if you want to ask a question but don't want to be filmed, you can feel free to tweet using hashtag #AskTristram, and I'm sure that I will fulfill my duty never to look at any of those tweets while taking questions at the end, but I will really try. So the agenda is quite simple. Tristram is going to talk for 35 minutes, and then we'll have 25 minutes questions from the audience. So to the topic and the speaker. Well, when it comes to politics, it seems clear that something is happening. The problem is I'm not sure that any of us here tonight really understand exactly what that something is. I was reading something recently that said 2015 was the first anti-political general election. And the Crick Centre studies political engagement and what is often referred to as anti-politics. Now, what's interesting is that I spend far too much time at public events, and I don't actually sense anti-politics. I sense a very strong pro-politics, but pro doing politics differently. The challenge there is, although we might want to do politics differently, we're not actually sure what we mean by doing politics differently or how a transition might occur. And it's that sort of tension which leads to the topic of this evening's talk and to our guest. Tristram Hunt is a lecturer in modern British history at Queen Mary, University of London, and is the MP for Stoke-on-Trent Central, a seat that he's held since 2010. I'm sure Sir Bernard Crick would be incredibly happy that Tristram Hunt is here talking this evening in the Crick Centre, because Tristram really manages to bridge both academic life and politics as a vocation, politics in practice. And that is a really difficult challenge to pull off. He was, until very, very, very recently, Shadow Secretary of State for Education. But tonight, he's going to go back to a broad question and to help us map out exactly what this new politics for new times might actually look like. So, it's my great pleasure to welcome and thank Tristram Hunt for coming this evening and invite him to take the stage.
Matthew, thank you very much indeed. It's a great pleasure to be here. And let me first of all thank Matthew for hosting and chairing this event. Thank Professor Nicola Phillips, Head of the Department of Politics, for supporting it. And of course, David Blunkett for inviting me here to begin with. Let me begin, as I must, in Sheffield, the proud city of the Guild of St. George, with John Ruskin. And the great cry that rises from all our manufacturing cities, louder than their furnace blast, is all in very deed this, wrote Ruskin in The Stones of Venice, that we manufacture there everything except men. We blanch cotton and strengthen steel and refine sugar and shape pottery, but to brighten, to strengthen, to refine or to form a single living spirit never enters into our estimate of advantage. That is what our two cities, Sheffield and Stoke-on-Trent, have done. We have strengthened steel and shaped pottery. In the process, Ruskin thought, we had dehumanized and alienated the soul of man. We had manufactured everything except men. It was a message which another 1880s radical, Edward Carpenter, took to heart. Not far from here, at his Millthorpe farm in Caldwell Valley, Carpenter decided to practice a politics which rejected the compromises of the present and opted instead for a commune of new lifers, manly comradeship, and Eastern mysticism. Like Ruskin, Carpenter never subscribed to the grubby but useful socialism of wage levels and work rates. His creed was a larger socialism, which accepted redistribution and land nationalization, but also drew on the Platonic tradition, German idealism, and Hindu spiritualism. He wanted a socialism which would not simply end material inequality, but would bring new forms of associating and relating in harmony with nature. Carpenter and his fellow simple lifers started the day with naked swims, worked the earth in woolen tunics, and ate a great deal of porridge and radishes. Millthorpe emerged as a countercultural hub, an anti-politics settlement in the face of Victorian materialism. But in Sheffield, there was also a tradition of those who believed in engaging with the political process. That tradition was, of course, best symbolized by the late Sir Bernard Crick and his masterful 1962 text, In Defense of Politics. The business of politics, he wrote, is the conciliation of differing interests. But what Sir Bernard also famously said was that free men stick their necks out. So this evening, I want to stick my neck out about new politics for new times. In short, how we in the Labour Party should respond to the changing political landscape of populism and social media, a ruptured political economy, and new identities of patriotism. And my message is this: the only way to confront economic inequality and to democratize power is to once again become a party of government. For the new politics of Jeremy Corbyn's leadership represents an exciting opportunity and an obvious threat. The challenge of new energy, growing membership, intellectual opportunity and renewal, the threat of perennial demonstration, the thrill of being the relentless outsider. This week we have watched, with our face pressed against the glass, not only a Tory victory parade at their conference in Manchester, but also the sights of them manoeuvring for succession and laying the foundations for their next election campaign too. I passionately believe our country cannot afford to have Labour left on the street outside, protesting about the decisions of the powerful within. My ambition is a Labour Party return to power on a new appreciation of its principles and purpose. But before we get caught up with the new politics, let's not lose sight of the old politics. Our failure in May to win enough seats in the House of Commons to form a Labour government. Unless Labour can once again become the party of the majority of the working class, it has no future, except as a coalition of minority pressure groups and interests. Yet there is only a modest future for a party which represents only such groups and social forces on the decline. If Labour cannot get back the sort of communities represented by Stevenage or Harlow or Swindon or Slough, we can forget about the British or any other realistic road to socialism. Not one of the many postmortems of this year's loss, but Eric Hobsbawm's account of the 1983 general election loss. And not since 1983 have we in the Labour Party been so out of step with the prevailing mood of the nation. I think we now face an electoral battle across three distinct fronts. The rise of nationalism in Scotland, a lack of trust in historically Labour communities across the Midlands and north of England, and a loss of confidence in Middle England about the Labour Party's ability to manage the public purse and to protect family finances. The work John Cruddas has carried out on our loss is more specific. He has identified 4 strands behind Labour's electoral meltdown. First, it was pragmatic-minded voters who dealt Labour our devastating defeat. Voters whose main concern was their personal financial circumstances. They abandoned us because we lacked economic credibility on tax and spend. Second, we lost because voters believed we were anti-austerity. Difficult as this may be to accept, voters did not reject Labour because they saw us as austerity light. They rejected Labour because they thought we were anti-austerity light. As John argued, this does not mean that we should have accepted the Tory economic strategy. Rather, it means that we should have been more effective in our efforts to contest the story that they told about the country's economic situation. Third, since 2010, Labour has marched decisively away from the views of voters on issues that are fundamental to our electoral prospects: immigration, welfare, public services, and business. Fourth and finally, Labour is losing its working class support, and it is UKIP that benefits. Since 2005, it is voters who are socially conservative that are most likely to have deserted Labour. They feel their cultural identity is under threat. They want a sense of belonging and national renewal. They feel that Labour no longer offers them a compelling account of a better future. More than that, there is a sense far deeper than 1983 of the cultural ecology that underpinned the Labour movement beginning to crumble. I see it in Stoke-on-Trent, a city which I always think can lay a credible claim to being the first city of the Labour movement. It was in Stoke, at Josiah Wedgwood's Etruria Works, that the Industrial Revolution began. And it was across North Staffordshire that nonconformism, and in particular John Wesley's Methodism, first energised the English working class. We had the pits, the pots, the chapels, the co-ops, the steelworks, the unions, and with all that came the unequivocally progressive politics. But these foundational institutions, which for so long have provided British social democracy with its cultural anchors, are barely a presence in the vast majority of my constituents' lives anymore. The chapels are empty, the working men's clubs have closed, trade union membership is down and close to non-existent in much of the private sector. And despite some encouraging recent signs, deindustrialisation, driven by global competition, has laid waste to too much of our manufacturing economy. This withering of our labour roots has eroded the sentimental and electoral loyalty to our party in many white working class communities. This presents those of us in the Labour Party with an extraordinary political challenge, the answer to which can only be found if we begin by grounding ourselves, as Eric Hobsbawm argued, in the real and not the imagined concerns of people's lives. In the aftermath of the general election loss, I argued that the Labour Party needed to pursue a strategy of renewal which was neither Podemos nor PASOKification, which should serve as a warning to all of us about seeking to build a political project on the basis of alliteration. But the point remains valid. I was calling for a strategy for the party which steered between the two jagged rocks of, on one side, a hollowed-out internal party democracy and relevance of traditional centre-left parties, such as PASOK in Greece, and on the other side, the easy populism of Podemos in Spain. Instead, what we need to do is take some of the new politics and combine it with the Labour Party's historic mission as a majoritarian governing party. We need a politics which is both patriotic and prudent, compassionate and competent, emotionally intelligent, as well as economically literate. Part of the great achievement, I think, of Jeremy Corbyn's campaign to be leader of the Labour Party was to ensure that our party did not undergo some form of post-defeat PASOKification. In the week following Jeremy's victory, more than 50,000 people joined the Labour Party. 150,000 have joined as members since our defeat. This is all good news. Some have joined seeking an antidote to the cynicism and soullessness of professional electioneering, where the disempowering of the young and the gilding of the old supposedly go unchallenged because that's just how you win elections. And we should welcome them. For others, it was our hidebound constitutional settlement storing up anger with its inability to cater for the new politics of nationhood, identity, and belonging, and we should welcome them. Still more have come because they simply seek the chance to help make change happen to people's lives, and we should welcome them too. Certainly part of the attractiveness, I think, of the Corbyn campaign was the perception that an open conversation was central to his politics. This tapped into the same raw hostility towards the closed political habits of a technocratic elite that has emboldened so much European populism on both left and right. The command and control, disciplinarian message of 1990s political management looks increasingly incompatible with the coming age of authenticity and individualism. Similarly, as Labour Deputy Leader candidate Stella Creasy has argued, during the general election campaign, we saw the limits of our contact creator, voter ID approach to political mobilisation. Our celebrated 4 million, 5 million conversations too often meant talking at voters rather than discussing with them. It wasn't, she writes, a conversation in the sense that anybody else would understand, because it was about telling us something we want to know. In an age where people want politics not to be broadcast at them, but interactive, where they don't just want to be told this group of people can make their lives better, they want to be part of it. But the challenge is this: what happens when this habit of new politics, aptly described by Matthew as a world of boycotting, squatting, pinging, hacking, flash mobs, Twitter-led mobilisations, and a general broadening rather than narrowing of the ways in which people express themselves politically, what happens when that comes up against cold electoral reality? Because there is a risk, I think, with what we might call algorithm politics. What the algorithms which underpin our digital lives do is take information about us and fire similar information back at us. Google's skill at offering you what it knows you like is now directing you towards what you want to hear from people like you. And I think this radicalizes political opinion amongst the committed, on both left and right, emboldens groupthink, and disconnects the hyper-engaged from the sentiments of the wider electorate. Not least because what people say to each other on the internet and social media in particular rewards strong, polarizing opinions and primary-colored politics. And because it teaches us to appropriate culture as expressions of our individual personal identity. On Twitter, you are defined by those you follow and those who follow you. Far from broadening the mind through access to the greatest library human beings have ever created, people's experience of the internet can increasingly be a narrow online world where anyone who puts their heads above the parapet can be the target of an anonymized digital mob. If social media were politicizing the many as well as radicalizing the few, were it significantly growing the number of people engaged in politics in first place rather than confirming pre-held bias, then Ed Miliband might now be sitting in 10 Downing Street, and this discussion, enjoyable as it is, would not necessarily be taking place. So our political challenge in the party is to channel this remarkable online energy, as well as that popular surge which attracted so many to town halls and hustings to hear Jeremy Corbyn speak, into some of the essential political habits of community involvement, public engagement, citizen participation, people's assemblies, and standing for office. We need the new politics to transform itself into a more substantive part of the Labour movement. The truth of it is that even in the era of new politics, some old certainties remain. The importance of strong leadership and sound policy. For some commentators, the nature of our loss against nationalism in Scotland, UKIP in Labour heartlands, and Tories in the marginals necessitates a slice and dice strategy of different messages for different political audiences. But I do not believe that micro-targeting policy solutions for separate groups of people will work, either as an electoral strategy or a programme for government. Instead, we need a radical programme that is rooted in Labour's liberal, socialist heritage, but one that also has, as Eric Hobsbawm used to say, the future in its bones. A socialism that embraces technology and modernity and sees the function of the state as supporting and empowering citizens in an age of insecurity. The quickening pace of globalization, changes to the labour market, the rise of robots and supercomputers, and the urgent need for social security reform, they are all here to stay. And so we need to think big. Make no little plans, the celebrated Chicago architect Daniel Burnham once wrote. They have no magic to stir men's blood. And so in thinking big, we need to begin first and foremost with political economy. Given the chronic wage stagnation and falling living standards affecting so many people, we can be much more forthright about the limits and failures of markets. Across time and place, what Karl Marx taught us was that capitalism takes on multiple forms, and Labour has now to lead the thinking on what forms of corporate governance, finance, and ownership are fit for the digital age. When the British Chancellor flies to Beijing to offer government securities to Chinese investors to support the French state in building a UK nuclear power station, our economic model is bust. On housing, asset inflation, pension and mortgage policies for the self-employed, land tax rates, and even basic income guarantees, there are so many radical options to explore. Secondly, we need a bold welfare reform agenda based on Labour values with which to counteract the Tories' punitive cuts. In the run-up to the general election, we gave the impression we were against every and any new idea on social security reform. We offended the British people's sense of fairness by appearing to oppose the benefits cap. The truth is, though, that the Tories have an incredibly deficient agenda when it comes to welfare reform. As we've seen at Tory party conference this week, you know you are in trouble when even Boris Johnson, David Davis, and The Sun are suggesting that the upcoming cuts to working tax credits are unjust and punitive. So I believe Labour can and must seize the initiative here. Go back to Beveridge and restore the contributory principle. More important than ever in an age of mass migration, as a sense of unfairness about welfare contributes to resentment towards new arrivals. The rule should be, the more you pay in, the more you get out. If you have a strong record of work, you should receive more help and protection for your home when you fall on hard times. Because right across the world, countries with an entitlement-based system such as ours are gripped by diminishing social support for the welfare state. But we also need similar game-changing breakthrough on community. Sheffield has now joined Manchester in moving towards combined authority status. It is an infuriating fact that we allowed the Tories to steal our clothes on this devolution agenda. I believe that place matters, that the right policy for Sheffield is not necessarily the right policy for Glasgow. Policy innovation works in a devolved context. Our history, David's history of municipal socialism, gas and water socialism, gives us a localist heritage. In Glasgow, Manchester, Birmingham and Sheffield, it was progressives who built a vibrant civic democracy, confronted vested interests, and created the great age of Victorian and Edwardian civic pride. But both Labour and the Conservatives then colluded in the century of centralisation. Too often, we have allowed the command and control culture of our statism to poison the community well. Labour needs to win the race to hand power back to people and local communities. We need a Devo Max settlement for England, and I think the experiment going on here in Southampton about what form that should take is so exciting. We should continue to campaign against the unfair, arbitrary and brutal allocation of cuts to local government, which sees cities like Stoke-on-Trent and Sheffield hammered, whilst the likes of Dorset and Hampshire are protected. But we should not use that indignation just to ignore the devolution agenda or retreat back into statism. We must shelve our timidity, match George Osborne's offer, and go beyond it by giving city and county regions the power to vary local taxes, including business rates, from a baseline which takes account of regional disparities of wealth. And we should also, and I would say this because I partly commissioned it, accept David Blunkett's reviews for how we devolve control of schools. The government seem happy to devolve skills and transport to combined authorities, but why not schools? Why not have local control over the commissioning of schools and the raising of standards in combined authority areas given to school commissioners? The level of centralisation still within our education system remains absurd. Finally, on family. All the evidence shows how stable, loving family relationships are absolutely crucial to child development, early education, and indeed happiness. The impact of those nurturing relationships in the early years, so beautifully captured in Robert Putnam's new book, Our Kids, cannot be overstated. Our Kids, Putnam's book, is an account based around the Ohio of his upbringing, of how economic change and family breakdown is destroying social mobility. First went the secure jobs and the broad-based working and lower middle class prosperity. Then went the social capital, the churches, the trade unions, the community associations, which bound people together, providing common life, an informal safety net, and wider cultural horizons. Finally, even the stable family unit, the most powerful institution for early child development and, as such, long-term well-being and achievement, began to creak under extra stress too. It is a trajectory we can sadly recognise in deindustrialised communities where poverty, social deprivation and low attainment are so prevalent. Of the 12 countries surveyed in the OECD's last major social mobility report, Britain had the strongest link between an individual's earnings and those of their parents. Inequality passed down through the generations through huge disparities of wealth, power and opportunity. That is the shameful record of our country today. The government's solution is to abolish the methods by which child poverty is counted. A Whitehall sleight of hand which will do nothing to lift children out of poverty in Stoke-on-Trent. So we need a bigger, braver vision, and one that goes beyond the belief that child poverty can only be solved through material redistribution. For too long, this approach has bloated our welfare system. We spend as much on redistribution as the famously egalitarian Scandinavian countries, but with far less effect. We need institutions that tackle inequality at source by raising parents' opportunities to work, children's opportunities to learn, and families' opportunities to plan their time together. I would suggest that we need to rethink our entire approach to the post-war offices of state and government bureaucracy. We need to build a social investment state where the principle of pre-distribution, of attacking inequality at root, ensuring funds and bureaucracies are focused on preventing social dysfunction upstream rather than mopping it up downstream, is central to a reformed Whitehall. The old departmental behemoths of education and health, Home Office and justice seem increasingly out of date for the nimble, preventative state we need. Their primary administrative purpose is too often to stave off the effects of failure, rather than commission the smart services and invest in the future-proofing policies that really deliver change. Too many of them are still the rotten edifices of the 19th century, holding back the social reform we need. And just as local government has transformed itself in the face of austerity, so too must the central state. In 2012, as I was reflecting on the Labour Party's last loss, and I really don't want to have to reflect on a third loss, I wrote in 2012, among social groups uneasy about the impact of globalisation, national identity and other cultural issues will play a bigger role in determining political allegiances. As the only political party to seek mass support across all three countries in Great Britain, increasing levels of Scottish, Welsh and English nationalism could present an especially acute and difficult challenge for the Labour Party. And I wasn't kidding. Because a crucial component of the new politics is how European debate is taking on an increasingly nationalist character. How issues of culture, identity and defending the national interest are becoming as important, if not more important, than what we might regard as conventional questions of public policy. The impact of the SNP upon the Labour Party's general election campaign perfectly captures the challenges mainstream social democracy faces with nationalism. In Scotland and England, for different reasons, too many voters felt Labour was not standing up for them or their national interest. We were to Scotland like the EU is to Greece, a foreign technocratic elite telling them they could not be trusted with their own affairs. This sort of national struggle between national or regional democracy and identity on one hand and technocracy on the other is increasingly the prism through which European voters refract their politics. And it is hurting us twice over, not only because our party came into being to represent the people and not the elite, but also because right-wing conservative and nationalist forces appear to have a deeper and more emotional affinity with nation, the national culture, and national interest. And of course, at this point, we have to reach for another part of Bernard Crick's great contribution to socialist literature, his biography of George Orwell. For it is Orwell's accounts in The Lion and the Unicorn, Socialism and the English Genius, which has become the default account of the left and love of country. Famously, he wrote, "England is perhaps the only great country whose intellectuals are ashamed of their own nationality. In left-wing circles, it is always felt that there is something slightly disgraceful in being an Englishman, and that it is a duty to snigger at every English institution. It is a strange fact, but it is unquestionably true that almost any English intellectual would feel more ashamed of standing to attention during God Save the King than of stealing from a poor box." But Crick's point was this: Orwell's patriotism drew a clear distinction between deep love of one's land and culture, so that anyone who grows into that love can be a patriot, and nationalism, a claim to natural superiority over others. Crucially, it was also a radical democratic patriotism of the kind which so powerfully informed the politics of Clement Attlee, caught brilliantly in those final passages of The Lion and the Unicorn, when he writes that the heirs of Nelson and of Cromwell are not in the House of Lords. They are in the fields and the streets, in the factories and the armed forces, in the four-ale bar and the suburban back garden. And at present, they are still kept under by a generation of ghosts. Compared with the task of bringing the real England to the surface, even the winning of the war, necessary though it is secondary. By revolution, we become more ourselves, not less. Above all, Orwell was concerned with Englishness and not Britishness. Because for all the great work of the BBC, Team GB, Gordon Brown, the British Museum, and other cultural and political actors, today the natural and instinctive ties of Britishness are fraying. When the two defining edifices of Britishness, the Houses of Parliament and Buckingham Palace, are both declared unfit for human habitation, it suggests there might be something wrong in the body politic. And that means the Labour Party here in England and Wales needs to catch up fast. If Scottish Labour needs to rediscover its cultural and emotional ties to Scottish identity, then the Labour Party in England needs to embrace our English identity, emphasise our English culture. Because as the Emily Thornberry tweet for Rory showed, we appear uneasy with the modern landscape of Englishness, of St George's flags, music festivals, soap operas, Premier League, computer gaming, gardening. What makes it all the more frustrating is that there is such a rich English historical tradition which has always stood in fierce opposition to conservatism and inequality. From Thomas More to the Levellers, Thomas Paine, the Cooperatives, William Blake, George Orwell, and the great 20th century achievements of the Labour Party and the trade unions, there is a clear cultural strand of radical patriotic Englishness. Labour should remember this culture and give far greater voice to it. And I think it works on both sides of the Tweed. The story the SNP tell about the English is an account of how England's innate political sensibilities continually thwart Scotland's social justice ambitions. Reclaiming radical England, telling the story of England's progressive achievements, can in fact help to negate that damaging SNP story. To remind us once again that so many of Scotland's social justice ambitions are also shared by the people of England, and that in the face of the enormous challenge of globalisation, a strong common union allows us to face them together. The guilds and communes of John Ruskin and Edward Carpenter marked a retreat from politics. The vision of Bernard Crick and the public life of David Blunkett have been an affirmation of the merit of politics. I stand with the practical rather than the utopian socialists. Yet new times need new politics. If our election defeat in May has taught us anything, it is that we need to think deeply and profoundly about the future of the left and our political method. We need to revisit the fundamental question about what the Labour Party is for in these changing times. We need to understand that debate and discussion is a part of political development rather than simply a pathway to policy. And we need to be radical in our thinking about political economy and welfare and patriotic socialism. And above all else, we need to tell a story to the British people grounded in policy that stirs men and women's blood. The process of renewal has only just begun, and it will be a long and hard road back to power, one we will undertake in the spirit of solidarity, community, enterprise, and hard work. But we should never, ever lose sight of the fact that our party came into being as the Labour Representation Committee, not the Labour Protestation Committee. This is a zero-sum game. When we are not in power, our opponents are in power. And when I see the trade union bill attacking trade union rights, the education bill silencing parents, the assault on the independence of the BBC, the slashing of tax credits, fracking in our national parks, the gagging of charities, the withdrawal of maintenance grants for students, the closing down of Sure Start centres, and an inheritance tax cut for millionaires, I know that more than ever. You only stop those actions by being in government. A Labour Party perennially on the outside is bad news for Britain. And you are only trusted to form a government if you listen to the real, not imagined concerns of people's lives. So let me end this evening with the prophetic words of a great Leeds MP, the late Dennis Healey. who died last week. In the aftermath of Labour's general election defeat of 1959, he wrote, "There are far too many people who want to luxuriate in the moral righteousness of opposition. But who is going to pay the price for their complacency? In Britain, it is the unemployed and old-age pensioners. And outside Britain, there are millions of people in Asia and Africa who desperately need a Labour government in this country to help them. We are not just a debating society. We are not just a socialist Sunday school. We are a great movement that wants to help real people at the present time. We shall never be able to help them unless we get power. We shall never get power until we close the gap between our active workers and the average voter in the country. New times, new politics, but our mission remains the same, to be a party of government that challenges inequality and democratizes power. This is a politics worth more than just defending. It is the only politics I know worth championing." Thank you very much indeed.
Okay, well, thank you, Tristram, for an incredibly interesting talk, presentation. Certainly lots to go on. I'll give you a few seconds just to sort of gather your thoughts and take a breath. A couple of points. Tristram mentioned the citizens' assemblies, Assembly South and Assembly North. This is a big project that we have running here at the University of Sheffield, which is all about the current decentralisation agenda in England and trying to find new ways of allowing the public to have a voice in a whole set of reforms that are currently unfolding at a very great pace. Assembly North in Sheffield, Assembly South in Southampton, for the first time really allowing the public to play a role in policy making and experiment with new ways of doing politics. New politics for new times. We have around 15 minutes now for questions from the audience. I'll take them in twos or threes. If you please could make your questions concise, that would be super, and allow us to get more questions in. We've got a couple of roving mics, so if you'd like to ask a question, hands high up in the air, nice and clear. Okay, I've got, we'll take a man just down here at the front, we've got somebody up on the back row here, and we'll take the person just down here to start for the first three. Okay.
Right, I've got to think now. When you started, you were talking about the looking in at the Tory party conference and it being a victory parade. There's this whole thing about Jeremy Corbyn. All the papers are constantly telling us that he's got everything wrong and he's an idiot. Now, I think that with all these people joining the party and taking forward, with the whole thing about the Scottish nationalists, it looks to me as though there may actually be a different story here. It may be that people are taking a different politics, and that the politicians are the ones who are holding us back and not getting it right. I feel that the Tory party conference, he was taking on lots of socialist things. He didn't mention austerity, which they're running with. He seemed to be taking, you know, our clothes. Rather than a victory parade, I'd say he was showing that what, you know, we think is the right way to go. And
okay, I think there was a question in there somewhere.
Yeah, the question is, why is it that with the groundswell of opinion on politics coming in the Jeremy Corbyn Scottish nationalist way, that the media and the politicians still seem to be finding ludicrous little reasons to sideline it without having any sort of real sort of things. There's arguments there that we can go with.
Okay.
But we're not making them.
We'll take the question over here next while we take the microphone up to the top there, please.
Mr. Hunt, what exactly is your opinion on austerity?
That is what you call a concise question.
That
was
exactly.
Brilliant. There you go. Yeah, round of applause.
Yeah.
Okay, at the back.
Since Margaret Thatcher's election in 1979, we've lived in a neoliberal consensus through Blairism and Cameronism. You mentioned that to win power, you've got to think big. Labour's got to think big. Do you think that what Labour needs, therefore, is a radical left-wing equivalent to Margaret Thatcher, and is that Jeremy Corbyn?
Okay, Tristram.
Great. The first question about, I mean, I think you're absolutely right to begin with, that everything we've been told in the last 6 months and everything, you know, that has come from what might be termed the political elite has been shown to be dangerously out of step with what actually happened. The prognoses were wrong, and so I think treating with skepticism commentary is exactly right. But where I would probably sort of dig into your question a bit more is the notion that Scottish nationalism and Jeremy Corbyn's politics are one and the same. And my thesis is that the vote for the SNP in Scotland was, as you suggest, much more about nationalism than anti-austerity. Now, we're going to put this to the test in May. We're going to have a control, as you political scientists like it, because under Jeremy Corbyn's leadership, the Labour Party is a much more anti-austerity party, and we've got a Scottish nationalist party. So we will see where the Scottish voters lie. Is it about nationalism or is it about anti-austerity? And I think, contrary to what the SNP tell us, that actually, you know, the reason why they have been given permission by the Scottish people is actually they're quite fiscally conservative. And much of what they suggest is a sort of anti-austerity agenda. Actually, I think it's a much more consciously nationalist process. So my answer to your question is, as it were, not to lump these elements together, and we will see in May how they play out. What do I think of austerity? I think it is a waste of money that every year the government spends £36 billion on interest debt repayments. That £36 billion could go to schools or hospitals. That £36 billion could do something incredibly progressive for early years education. So I want governments to live within their means, because if you don't live within your means, you waste money that could go on progressive causes. But I think the government got it wrong between, as we said at the time, between 2010 and 2012, when they pulled the rug away on a very anti-austerity, on a very austerity-driven agenda, when the economy was beginning to come out of recession. So let's have the criticism of George Osborne's policies, absolutely right. But we've still got a substantial deficit. We're still adding to our debt. Governments need to live within their means, but we need to grow our way out of that. And then I think it's an interesting debate about public investment, about levels of investment. But and I don't accept, I've never accepted, you know, we were Greece, we were on the edge, all of that kind of stuff. But I would suggest our currency is more vulnerable than we think, and so we have to judge our approach to the public finances in probably a more prudent way than, I mean, not putting words into your mouth, than some might suggest. The evidence from John Cruddas is that if you are regarded as fiscally responsible, then you can be economically radical. And I would suggest that was the story of the Blair administration, that actually there was fiscal responsibility and great economic radicalism in terms of redistribution, raising tax to pay for the National Health Service. And they had permission to do that because they'd put the heavy work in, independence for the Bank of England, trust on public finances.
Okay, the final question.
Yes, sorry, I'm going on too long. Do we need a radical left-wing equivalent to Mrs. Thatcher? The answer to that is we didn't lose the general election because we were not regarded as left-wing enough. Mrs. Thatcher's story is the story of winning and holding power. So the notion that, as it were, being sort of even more left-wing would somehow win and hold us power, I don't accept. What I do definitely accept, and this is the excitement, I think, of the Corbyn moment, is the intellectual renewal and the intellectual radicalism. But you can only get to deliver that if you've passed certain hurdles with the British public about leadership and credibility. And so I'm very excited by lots of the ideas that are on the left at the moment. But I also know, to go back to Healy, we're not a debating society and we're not a socialist Sunday school. What we actually want to do is put those ideas into practice.
Okay, I want to take 5 more questions, quick answers.
Sorry, I'll be quick, sorry.
Can we get, we've got a lady here who wants to ask a question. We've got a man at the front who wants to ask a question. Somebody at the back, sorry, the light's in my eyes. 2 more people who want to ask a question. Okay, man here. Somebody right over there. Okay. Go.
Well, it seems that prior to the leadership election, you were quite opposed to Jeremy Corbyn. Now, from your speech, it sort of sounded that you might have changed your mind a bit. So where is this sway coming from?
Oh, politics. Not sure we're going to
new
go
politics.
There. Okay. Question over here, please. This.
Isn't one of the vital changes we need in our political structure to achieve a number of members of the Parliament which accurately reflect the proportion of voters? What does the Labour Party think about electoral reform?
Okay, question. We've got another question coming here. Oh, sorry, here and here. And then, oh, okay, go.
Hello, Tristram. I'm one of the members of the university's Labour Club. One of the things that would have been very unpopular amongst the University Labour Club that you invoked just now was Tony Blair. My question to you is, as a party, how do we reconcile that legacy going forward?
Tristram, you looked, I might say, particularly prime ministerial there in giving your speech. I wonder how long you see this movement of new politics taking to particularly come to fruit, and whether you would be its leader.
Okay, a fruity question there. Now, there's a final question over here.
Hello. I was very interested in what you said about the upstream interventions into welfare and making things for poverty happen beforehand. But I wondered if you were still planning on doing this through sort of some of the discredited payment by result systems and commoditizing people and giving contracts to 6 companies to deliver public services.
Okay, great questions.
Great. Okay, quickly. New politics, my previous views about Jeremy. Jeremy's now been elected the leader of the party, 60% of, across the registered, established members, affiliated.
His brother's in the house this evening.
No. Piers will be charting the weather. So he's the leader. So we got to get behind him and work on his strategy and his proposals. And what Jeremy's asked for is a wide-ranging debate about the nature of the party. And it behoves me as a member of Parliament, a member of the Labour Party, to get involved with that. So we all say things in the election campaign. I was backing a different candidate, fine, but Jeremy's won. So we get on with it. And that is the fruition of the new politics. The electoral reform, I voted against in the referendum last time. I'm more and more open to it, as long as you have to retain the constituency connection. You have to retain that. I'm in my surgery on a Friday afternoon. The constituents come and see me. That is so powerful and so strong and so right. But I think it will be reopened again, and I'm certainly more open to it now. When you've got 5 million votes, 4 million for UKIP and 1 million for Green, and only 2 MPs, something's out of kilter. The Tony legacy, I think I think Tony Blair was a great Prime Minister. I think he achieved an enormous amount, but Tony was selected as leader of the Labour Party 20 years ago. And Tony now sits in the sort of, you know, the pantheon of our leaders with Callaghan and Wilson and Attlee, and he needs to be placed there and celebrated there as part of a historical tradition. I do not think the policy prescriptions of the mid to late 90s are right for today. So the debate about, you know, are you Blairite or not, or all that kind of stuff, I regard that as, you know, totally unhelpful and irrelevant. It's about being grown up about his achievements and failures, grown up about the achievements and failures of that government, and then thinking about the future. I think we sort of need to get over our, you know, psychological hurdle about Tony, respect and admire, and, you know, historians criticise it as part of the past, but move on from it. What was the last question?
There was a last question about the commodification.
Oh, yes. Yeah, no, I'm really passionate about this idea of a social investment state. That I love, you know, I mean, we never found the right words for it, but when there's a brilliant book by Joseph Hacker, this political scientist at Yale, about pre-distribution, and we never got pre-distribution off the ground because of the word pre-distribution. But it's a very good idea in terms of, you know, intervening at that stage to, rather than to adjust some of the problems in the market, you know. In a sense, everything David worked on in terms of sure start centres, and that was about the pre-distribution agenda. But I think it can go much further. My problem is I'm not sure the bureaucracies are capable of doing it, but I absolutely agree that it, and this is where the Tories will get it massively wrong, and you can see this in justice and prisons at the moment. You hive it off to some of the big corporate players to save money, and actually, in the long run, you're not going to deliver the savings for the state that you want to see. So in the next couple of years, you know, there's some great, you know, German states doing some really interesting work on this. I think this should be a big part of Labour's agenda.
I think there might have been a slight segue over the question of your prime ministerial image.
Oh, no, that was,
you know.
No, I connected that with the fruition of the new politics in our new leader.
We'll leave it on that one then. Right, we're going to have one more round of questions. So if you've got a burning question, please put your hand up now. I want to get as many in as we can. Hands in the air. Okay, we'll take the chap in a blue T-shirt up there. Person there. Anybody else? Hands up. Yes, lady at the back. Well done. Jolly good. Harry Barnes, former Member of Parliament. Very nice to have you here, Harry. And the final question from over here. We'll take the man at the back. There you go. Right, and if you've got any questions, Tristram has given me his home phone number. He said, anybody got any questions, give it out at the end. Over the weekend, happy to take a call. Okay, so we'll take those 5.
You talked a bit about devolving power to English regions and around the country, and that's all well and good. But I was wondering if you could outline a little bit more about how you feel about not so much devolving, but ceding power upwards to perhaps a European level.
Okay, we have a second question. Yep.
I just wondered what you thought about the current two-party system we have and how long you think it can survive. At the moment, we've got, well, in your party, you've got a party that Jeremy Corbyn and Liz Kendall are in the same party. It seems quite strange to me, so I just wondered how long you think that can go on.
Okay. Liz, could you come to Harry? It's a race of the microphone holders. Okay, we'll go to the lady at the back, please. Yep.
Hi, my name's Stacey Uma. A lot of the, leading MPs in the Labour Party, Chuka Umunna, Liz Kendall, Yvette Cooper, they all decided, even yourself, I think maybe, you all decided that you didn't want to be in Corbyn's cabinet. How is that going to help the Labour Party win the 2020 election when the main members don't even want to be in the cabinet?
Matt Flinders pressed citizens' assemblies
and there's a type of citizens' assembly that Labour's supposed to be establishing. John Trickett has got the job of setting up a constitutional convention. There would have been a constitutional convention if we won the election, but now it's got to be of a different type of nature. And I was wondering whether you felt you could be involved rather fully in that work, because at one time you served on the Political and Constitutional Committee, which struck me as one of the best select committees that there were in the Commons, and which was destroyed by Cameron after the election because it was obviously a threat in the terms of the positions and proposals that would be putting forward that would look for a rather more democratic society than the one that he wants.
Okay, and we've got a final question coming right up at the top, please.
Are you a socialist or a social democrat?
Concise.
That's almost because of the austerity one.
Okay.
The European question, I think on the one hand, you know, the UK has benefited enormously from the ceding of power and the pooling of power and wealth at a European level. You know, the kind of objective one status many parts of the country received in terms of investment, the transformation of many cities, Liverpool, Sheffield, through Europe, labour rights, environmental rights, the kind of social Europe many of us on the left like to see. But I think I would argue against the further ceding of powers to Europe. I think the public would be very, very sceptical. The public are in a very nationalist mood at the moment, and what they like Europe. They like the virtues of Europe, but what they really like are strong governments sort of fighting against Europe at the same time. And this is why the right has done so well right across Europe, because they're battling against Europe whilst taking the benefits. And I remember very strongly one of David Cameron's election broadcasts, which was basically the greatest hits of him walking out of various meetings in Europe. And it was just him fighting Brussels on behalf of Britain. And so on the one hand, we can have, you know, EasyJet and all the virtues of the single market. On the other hand, we've got someone fighting our corner. So I think we need to be much stronger about, yes, establishing the virtues of Europe in the referendum, but also saying, you know, we'd get a good deal from it, and we need to be, I think, less shy about that. But I'll be against, I think, ceding further powers. The two-party system. Again, to go back to the first question about, you know, we were told old politics was over and we'd have a sort of endless coalition things. Well, we ended up with a majority Tory government, to, you know, my horror. So the power of political parties remains pretty strong. And I think they will continue to be so. I do think we're in the fight of our lives as a Labour Party, because partly what I set out in the lecture about the cultural ecology of our party being under threat. But there's no problem with, you know, Jeremy Corbyn and Liz Kendall being in the same party. Parties are coalitions. You know, we all pretend it's the line to take and all the rest of it, but parties are coalitions. And to go to the final point, there are many traditions within it. There are municipal socialist traditions, there are statist traditions, social democratic traditions, Trotskyist traditions. There are large parts. There are multiple parts within the party, and I think that's fine. Not serving in the shadow cabinet. To go to that coalition point, I have very substantial policy differences with Jeremy Corbyn on a range of areas, and I think you need total collective responsibility from your shadow cabinet. And I thought it was best to try and serve the party, as Jeremy did for 32 years, on the back benches rather than the front benches, because you've got to be honest to yourself about your politics. There's no point saying we believe in this age of authenticity and we hate career politicians and all the rest of it, and then saying, oh, well, okay, I'll just, you know, forget everything I've said over summer, forget my politics, actually, it's fine. Jeremy's the leader of the party, so he deserves, you know, support to get to that point. But I still have very strong views about our country and the way our country should be run and governed. Those are Labour views, but I think Jeremy, in his sort of shadow cabinet, needs everyone around him in terms of the collective responsibilities of some of his policies, whether it's the austerity stuff, whether it's Trident stuff, whether it's Europe, all of those elements. And I still have differing views on that. And to be fair to Jeremy, he wants a different approach in terms of that politics. And so being on the front bench, back bench doesn't make a huge difference, I don't think, for him in terms of how he sees all of us working for the party. Constitutional Convention, I think I've spoke to John, I went to see John Trickett the other week. I think he wants to get cracking on this. We want a Labour one anyway, and I'm going to work with John on that and try and support that. And the Constitutional and Political Affairs Committee was a very good committee under Graham Allen, and you're right, there was no need for it to be eliminated. I'm a socialist. I'm a socialist going back to the works of Robert Owen and Saint-Simon and Charles Fourier. You know, socialism begins as a religion of humanity. Socialism starts as a different conception of society. The Labour Party is not a socialist party until 1918. It's a radical, liberal Labour party. So the sort of statist elements within the party come and go as well. Socialism is a mansion of many rooms, and I'm very happy to occupy one of them. Thank you.
Well, it's been very nice to occupy a rather big room this evening with Tristram. I need to do two things. First of all, thank everybody for coming and to invite you to a journey around exotic England. That is the title of the Crick annual lecture on the 9th of November, when Yasmin Alibaya-Brown will be coming to talk about many of the things we've touched on today around Englishness, politics, history, and what it actually means today. So 9th of November, Crick annual lecture. Please, please, please do come along. So it just leaves me to say thank you ever so much, Tristram, for this evening. It's been a really enjoyable evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.